cakes.
If you're looking for me, you better check under the sea, 'cause that is where you'll find me, underneath the sea.
Welcome to Water Damage with your host, Gil Mancha. This is my chronological discussion of the King of the Seven Seas, Aquaman. Disclaimer, I will be actively getting and collecting issues as we go, and I'm trying to only cover issues that I have a physical copy of or in a collected edition. I'm going to try to stray away from digital because I love physical media, but the DC Universe Infinite app would be a great way to keep up with the podcast. Be sure to hit the follow button on Spotify or your preferred platform to get episodes as soon as they drop. In today's episode, we'll be covering Action Comics 261... Duels, the Animal Master. It's normally written as Aquaman, insert title, so you're meant to read it as Aquaman Duels, the Animal Master. Links will be in the podcast notes. This issue was released on April 30th, 1959. Let's take a look to see what else was happening that day in history.
Do it again!
Today in 1959, the best-selling single was Come Softly to Me by the Fleetwoods, and the top movie was Imitation of Life. Popular toys of this day are Spinning Tops, Wooly Willy, Fisher-Price Little People, and Crater Critters. If you're a little older, you might be going to a sock hop. They were informal dance events, and they got the name because they were often held in high school gyms, and the organizers didn't want scuff marks on the floor, so they had the teens take off their shoes, leaving their socks, hence the name. I'd love to hear if any of our listeners have ever heard of these songs or even went to a sock hop. I'm familiar with Spinning Tops, especially since I've played with 3D printed ones more recently. I remember Wooly Willy from a Bo Burnham song, and I want to say a Family Guy segment. I know the Fisher-Price brand, but not that toy or anything about Crater Critters. That's a taste of what the world was like when Action Comics 261 was released. I'm reading this thanks to Showcase Presents Aquaman Volume 1, but it's also available via the Aquaman Archives Volume 1. As of recording, this issue is not available on the DC Universe Infinite app, so besides those two resources, I'm not sure where else it's commercially available. Just like other issues we've covered, Action Comics is an anthology of stories, and this one is the last of 3. Superboy is first, as was the style at the time, and now Green Arrow is before Aquaman. Again, it's called Aquaman Duels, the Animal Master. From looking it up, every time we see the calf fin, it's dark green, but I'm not sure if that's like it in shadows or if that's how it's supposed to be colored. That said, the Showcase Presents series is in black and white, so if that's your only access to it, you wouldn't know. The story was written by Robert Bernstein, penciled and inked by Raymond Fradden, with editor Mort Weisinger. This cover of Adventure Comics focuses on the Superboy story, so we'll discuss the first panel of the Aquaman story. The Aquaman name is written in red this time, the most common color used. We see Aquaman standing in ankle-high water surrounded by aggressive land animals. A gorilla, an elephant, lion, and a horned animal I'm not very familiar with. There's an octopus, but I assume it's friendly towards him. In the background, we see a sword-wielding man whose shirt is tucked into his pants, but none of the buttons are done. That's our Animal Master. He's telling Aquaman he's trapped, and that his fish pals can't help him in the shallow water. So my animal friends and I won't have any trouble finishing you off. Big words. The text explains that as Aquaman is the master of sea creatures, Gustav the Great is the master of wild animals. But while Aquaman is a protector, Gustav is an enemy of mankind. It'll be a battle of sea creatures versus land animals when Aquaman duels the Animal Master. Since this book isn't on the DC Universe Infinite app, I can't read you guys the About This Book section. After the break, we'll summarize the issue.
Is Aquaman finished? Can you make it to the bathroom before we return with part 2 of the show?
What it do, guys? Manjoume here, and if you like board games, especially deck building games, you should check out @Team_Thunder on YouTube. There we have unboxings and games of Legendary, a Marvel deck building game, the DC deck building game, the Transformers deck building game, and many more. That's also where you can find VODs for this and Accelerated Visions, a Spider-Man 2099 podcast, where you can directly leave a comment and we can discuss the issues.
The Superman Aquaman Hour of Adventure, featuring Aquaman, King of the Seven Seas, and your favorite comic book superheroes in their own adventure stories. It's 60 minutes of thrills and fun, next on most of these stations.
We start the issue at a circus as a wild animal act ends and the crowd is cheering on Gustav, the animal trainer. Though bowing, he's thinking about how he doesn't care about their cheers, just wants money. On the day of a big charity performance, he lets the tigers out of the cage. Grrr, grrr. Everyone else at the circus thinks he's gone crazy. Instead, he gets his tigers, jaguars, lion, and leopard to surround the armored car guards. He threatens them with the cats, so they drop the money sacks with the charity earnings. He makes his getaway in the armored car while the cats are still on the guards. Doesn't matter because by the time the police find it, he'll be on a cabin cruiser bound for a life of pure velvet with this $500,000 in cash. For context, $500,000 would be worth $5,225,549.83 today. Which reminds me of that time on Futurama when Fry went to his bank account that he'd opened 1,000 years ago and realized his 93 cents had become $4.3 billion. At first I thought, no, that's not that much, but no, yeah, that's actually quite a bit when you adjust. When the police do get there, they correctly assume Gustav swapped to a boat since they were at a port. They alert Aquaman and say if he is at sea, he's as good as caught. Early the next morning, as Gustav's radio gives the news flash that Aquaman has joined the hunt for Gustav the Great. He sees Aquaman surfing toward him on a whale. Joined it? He's here! Aquaman himself, meddler, you'll never get me, naturally starts shooting at Aquaman. Bang bang. All the bullets miss Aquaman and somehow the whale. Zip, zip, zip. Seeing he won't go down without a fight, Aquaman boards the boat by swimming up a stream of water shot from the whale's blowhole. This view was established in at least Adventure Comics 220, The Coward and the Hero, when Aquaman was pretending to be a man afraid of water, and he was trying to impress people. Probably not a great idea, but he did a feat similar to this, which the onlookers thought, hey look, there's that trick that only Aquaman can do. You can learn more about that issue in episode 6 of this podcast. Whoosh! Once he makes his way to Gustav, he gives him a good right hook. Stay away! Once on board, Aquaman grabs the money and throws the sack into his own armored car, the mouth of the whale he'd been surfing on, saying it'd be safer for the money to be with the whale in case of a storm, plus he'd given it orders to leave the money at the nearest port. Before Aquaman can think of what he'll do with Gustav, he hears another radio message which they just blast on normal radio, hoping Aquaman would be listening, that a plane had to make a landing in a squall so he had to leave to save the passengers. Before he left, he tampered with the engine so Gustav couldn't get away. Aquaman's able to speed off and get to the plane quickly, and use a giant squid to hold the plane until help arrived. There's a storm and he hopes it hasn't engulfed Gustav's boat. However, when he gets back, the storm had broken up the boat. Thinking he died, Aquaman leaves without looking for the body. What he doesn't know is that Gustav was alive, clinging to life. The only thing giving him the will to hang on was to get revenge. I must live to revenge myself on Aquaman. Which grammatically took me a second to read, but older comic. Luckily, the storm eventually passed and he drifts for days. Again, the only thing keeping him alive, despite the thirst, hunger, and burning sun, was his drive for vengeance. I must destroy Aquaman for what he did to me. Several days later, he washes up on an island. A week later, he's recovered and finds a leopard caught in a hole. Grrr, grrr. If I free him, great guns! It just hit me. I know how to get revenge. I'm not Gustav the Great for nothing. Soon after, he cut his hair and trimmed his beard, somehow, and tamed the same leopard, who's purring on him like a kitten. He decided that just like how Aquaman is master of sea creatures, he'll become the master of animals. A year later, which makes me realize we get a lot of time skips in this issue, he's got an army of animals on his side. He's got a gorilla, lion, leopard, tiger, buffalo, and elephant. He throws a distress message in a bottle that he knows Aquaman will, eventually, read and come to rescue. When he does, he'll fall into his trap. A few weeks later, we see Aquaman waist deep in water, reading messages from bottles and an eel and flying fish with papers in their mouth with other messages. The message he's reading in particular says someone is being held captive by a pirate gang, so Aquaman decides to take along a task force of his marine pals to free the captive. The next day, he makes his way to the island using the crude directions on the message. There he finds a growling ape. Grrr, grrr. This must be the island. Great Scott, a gorilla. The gorilla gets into the water and extends its arms toward Aquaman, who's thinking about how he's a goner. An instant after, yow, yow! He's gone crazy, thrashing about in pain. Now I can escape him. Aquaman puts his head underwater and sees what happened. Some electric eels came to his rescue and attached themselves to the gorilla's feet to repel it. A little later, we see Gustave looking on behind a tree, saying it's no matter that he's being the gorilla because where he's going now, he'll be doomed. 10 minutes later, Aquaman makes it to a shallow stretch with bigger rocks above the waterline so his aquatic friends can't help. Seeing this, Gustave sends his elephant, Jumbo, to crush them under his huge feet. That's when he reveals to Aquaman that his one purpose is to get revenge and destroy him with his trained animals. After all this hate, all Aquaman can get out is a shocked Gustave, you're alive! As the elephant approaches, Gustave tells Aquaman this showdown will prove who has the superior force. Bree! Thinking quick, Aquaman orders a school of luminous fish to take the shape of a spotlight. Yo! Here's where we get our quote of the issue.
What's the matter, Aquaman?
I don't know. The fish are trying to tell me something.
It worked! The luminous fish beamed a blinding shaft of light into the elephant's eyes. Panicking it, it's veering away. The solution to a gorilla was 2 eels shocking it. That one makes sense. Not that crazy. But I could see this scene happening in Pokemon, where a group of lanterns show up to shine a light to blind a rampaging Pokemon. Next up is the lion. Grrr! Grrr! Aquaman sends up his octopus, which wraps its tentacles around the king of beasts, even muzzling its jaws. Still determined, he goes to finish Aquaman off himself with a steel sword he fashioned from the metal scrap of Rex. He did a great job making it, and even has a handguard. He rushes to Aquaman, who's on the ground. A swordfish jumps up to cross swords with him. Crack! Click! Is there no end to the ingenuity of Aquaman's sea creatures? The swordfish wins, disarming Gustave. Not yet beaten, he calls on a buffalo to bring him a dozen homemade bombs, coconuts stuffed with explosive cellulose. However, when he reaches for the bombs, the buffalo tips over the raft holding the bombs. Doused in water, they're ruined. Aquaman tells him he's wasting his breath. It won't listen to him and that he'd given the telepathic order to tilt the raft. Super confused, he claimed that he trained it for a year and it'd obey his slightest command. He's a land animal. That's where you made your mistake, Gustave. My authority over that buffalo overrides yours. Aquaman punches Gustave. Crack! Ow. You see, he's a water buffalo. Later, Aquaman gathers an old net from the ocean floor and gives the corners to flying fish to make an aerial cell to transport Gustave to land where police can apprehend him. Gustave yells to Aquaman that as soon as he finishes his prison sentence, he'll have his revenge. I have nothing to worry about, Gustave, because as master of animals, you're all wet. The end. After the break, we'll go over some thoughts and feelings about the issue.
Wait a minute. That was no joke. Somebody tried to kill me. That or we're not paying Mr. Slippery enough. Holy Neptune's trident. This has to be the work of the Legion of Doom. Hey, there's an echo inside my head. Echo. Echo. Echo.
You okay, Aquaman?
Echo. Echo. What? Oh, no problem.
Gustave has such a hate boner for Aquaman, who blames him for stranding him on that island, I guess. Granted, it is his fault for him being stuck on an immobile boat since Aquaman had tampered with the engine. Honestly, before that day on the island, Aquaman probably thought he was at blame for killing him. Let's not forget that this started with him stealing a lot of money that was supposed to go to charity, though. Honestly, it kind of feels like Aquaman was facing a lesser Kraven the Hunter. I don't know if he appeared in more recent comics, but if he does, it'll probably just be a copy of Kraven, but for DC. If one already exists, let me know on Twitter, YouTube, or the Spotify question about the issue. At only 8 pages, it's not a long issue, so I think that's why the interactions with the various animals are pretty quick. I would say that it doesn't feel like it's a rushed comic, and I enjoyed the craziness of it all. The story continues the trend of Aquaman easily overcoming obstacles. Got a gorilla? We'll shock it. Got an elephant? Several fish with lights combine their light to momentarily blind it. Lion? Octopus, use wrap. A sword? Aquaman has a swordfish pal. Given, Gustave was astounded by the utility of the water creatures. While we're discussing it, so many of those animal interactions felt like Pokemon battles, especially when the octopus faced the lion. The only thing missing was Aquaman calling out the moves. And I'm sure if they were to have a current day rematch, it probably would look more directly like a Pokemon homage. What do you think? Did you read the comic? Did I get something wrong? If I did, and you guys let me know, I'll be sure to include a correction section in the next episode and I'll credit the user. Let's continue the discussion on social media and the YouTube VOD. You can find me at ManjoumeThunder on Twitter and at Team_Thunder on YouTube. If you're looking for another podcast to listen to and want to learn more about the Spider-Man of the future, check out Accelerated Visions, a Spider-Man 2099 podcast on Spotify and anywhere you can find podcasts. Manjoume out.
Whew, man. Glad that stopped before things got worse.